Ezra. For those of you that don't know me, I'm affectionately known as daughter number 2. Today you may hear some baby voices, which is lovely and just shows the circle of life in our family. But just a reminder in this digital age, whatever, turn your phones off, please. On behalf of my brother, Aaron, my sister Amy, and her husband Farns, Isaac's grandchildren and great-grandchildren, we welcome you. Isaac's community. We so appreciate that so many of you have come to join us today. We are here to honor my father and to celebrate his life. We gather together to mourn our shared loss of Isaac Ben Ezra, the man, the community activist and organizer, the unstoppable crusader for human justice, the rabble-rouser, the peacemaker, the wise counselor, the dedicated husband and lover of Hilda, the faithful and genuine son-in-law, son, grandparent, great-grandparent, uncle, and father. I want to begin with a little story. Recently, I was attending the wedding of my dear friend Joanne's son, Adam, at Lake George. Yes, I'm not. Okay. Finding myself with one of Adam's friends in the cabin, we got to talking, and he told me he grew up in Amherst. Close in age to my niece Lev, I asked, did he know Lev Ben Ezra? Josh replied, I don't know her, but there's this legendary guy in Amherst, Isaac Ben Ezra. That's my dad. Josh, I love that guy. I've talked with him at the market so many times, and I know my mom knows him even better. She's active in the Democratic Party. Turns out, I just heard the other day that my father had mentioned Josh to my sister many times. Well, you know where that story was going. Let me say I will leave it to others to speak about his legacy of activism. I'll talk to you about my dad and my mom because you really can't separate one from the other. Theirs was the ultimate love at first sight story, and the depth of that love continued to grow throughout their lives together. Despite truly being best friends, they each had a huge capacity to nurture individual friendships, as well as their relationships with other couples. Our home was always filled with their friends, all kinds of parties and holiday celebrations. There are new friends in this room, recently, as the past 1 or 2 years, to long-lasting friendships that have spanned 75 years. We are so grateful that Roz Hoffman traveled from a distance to be here today. We are grateful to so many others who welcomed them into this community and enriched their lives. Whoever would have thought when he sold his home on Strong Street to move in with Amy and Farns here that he'd gained 2 new dear friends, Daisy and Eric. Amy and Farns not only added a suite onto this house, but have given their boundless love, devotion, and care to Dad, which has been essential to maintaining his quality of life these past years. So many of you have created a local support network simply by nurturing your friendships with Isaac or spending time here at a moment's notice when we needed help. There is no way to express how much my dad, Amy, Aaron, Farns, and I have appreciated this. Jeff, Cynthia, Frank, Norton, Amanda, Sean, Allison, Andy, Lev, Heather, Nancy, Kelly, and many others, forgive me for not naming all of you. We have been fortunate to meet Sarah and Torvald, placed with him by the O'Connell Agency, who also couldn't resist his charms and became close to him beyond their professional obligations. Thank you, and also our thanks to the many others from O'Connell who were so caring. When Dad needed a place to convalesce from this latest broken bone, Amy had the idea that he'd do better at Fisher Hospice for the kind of pain management required. We thought we'd be sneaking him in there under a little loophole, and that he'd come home to us. The care was amazing, with the most gentle, kind, and thoughtful staff. Unfortunately, his room there became his last stop. Dad wasn't able to come home until now. Isaac was the youngest son of immigrant parents from Turkey. His eldest brother, Mark, was born in Istanbul. Two more brothers, Joseph and Leon, and his sister Regina, 10 years his senior, were all born here. Dad was the surprise baby of the family. Dirt poor is an understatement, yet they each found a way to claw their way out of the ghetto. He was a mama's boy in the best sense of the phrase, totally devoted to her until her early death in her late 50s. In his early 20s, he longed for a domestic life with the right partner, something very different from the troubled and impoverished childhood that shaped him. So when he met my mother, there was no stopping the two of them. They decided to marry after knowing each other for barely 2 weeks, and were married within 4. Afraid their parents would think that 2 weeks was too brief a courtship, they lied and said it was 3. Raised in the Depression era, they wanted that piece of the American dream. I was supposed to be holding this, but I'm shaking. Thank you. They wanted that piece of the American dream. A home, a big family, and a full refrigerator. Love is not always bliss, and we 3 children witnessed our share of ups and downs over the years, but we always knew they had great love and respect for one another. They argued, but never demeaned one another in any way, no foul language or name-calling. They lived by the tenet, never go to bed angry. When they simply bickered, we, the children, teased them. We would say, here they go again. It's the Isaac and Hilda show. This never ceased to make everyone laugh and lighten the tension. They were always there for one another through the happiest and the toughest of times. Dad was never really able to get over the broken heart he had when our mom died 11 years ago. He continued on to have the fullest life he could, but missed her every day. Despite their progressiveness, they did fall into many traditional gender roles as couples. After all, they were both born in 1926. When Amy became a mother, and later when I became a mother, Hilda, our mom, was the one who actively took on the dominant role of grandparenting. Planning outings, cooking favorite foods, organizing holidays, mailing special cartoons or newspaper cuttings to each of our children when she saw something they might enjoy. Don't get me wrong. Dad was always there and involved. Each of the grandchildren enjoyed him bringing out clay and sculpting with them or teaching them to water the lawn. He just might be distracted by his efforts to save the world for us and future generations. In some ways, my mother's passing made the space for the greatest gift my father received and then gave to me and my children. He realized that he was it. My mom was gone, and he had to take over if those relationships were to deepen and flourish. He stepped up to the plate and became the grandparent that Alex and Sarah love and admire today. They, along with Lev, David, and his family, have been the fortunate recipients of his tremendous love and attention. Now, a few words for my dad. Dear Dad, thank you for passing on to me your terrific head of hair, your graceful hands and long fingers, your great eyesight, your compassion, your optimism, your artistic creative side, although we do express it in different ways. And did I mention your vanity? You've always been a snappy dresser. Thank you for keeping your brittle bones to yourself. I think you should be in the Guinness Book of World Records for most broken bones and outrunning death over and over again. The cat with more than 9 lives. You have shown an incredible zest for life, an inspiration to me. Despite multiple periods with extreme pain, you coped with it when others would have thrown in the towel. Pushed yourself beyond the limits to endure physical therapy and recover time and time again. Sadly, not this time. It's been such a gift having so much one-to-one time this past year, especially the 2 weeks while Amy and Farns were on vacation. You enjoyed my cooking and pampering. We loved seeing Maudie at the Amherst Cinema and watching the eclipse while eating the most delicious ice cream at Cook's Farm. The last few months, we delighted in sharing my house hunt, looking at pictures, planning my return to Bucks County, and yours for long visits there as well. We were envisioning entertaining locals, Wilma and Scott, Doug and his family, spending time with Roz, who'd be close by in Philly, Lorraine, Jean, and of course seeing Sarah and Alex more frequently, with both of them being near to my new digs. You were my partner in plotting and negotiating each deal. What should I offer? What about a counter? Your knowledgeable input from being a realtor long ago. One of your many careers. As kids, we enjoyed family outings, going to open houses, and recently shared your addiction for the Property Brothers. When the Carversville house deal fell through, you were even more disappointed than I was. You told me how impressed you were with my positive attitude and how I handled that setback. But when we found the Mechanicsville Roadhouse, you were all in. Whatever it takes, you'd say, get that house. Love at first sight one more time. The view of the pond and the big red barn in the backyard captured us. A first-floor bedroom and bathroom ready and waiting for you, with easy access to the deck right outside for a sun-drenched afternoon. Being there together was a dream we shared. I am so like you. I still maintained hope that we could fulfill that dream as recently as several weeks ago. As I begin the next chapter in my new home, you will be forever intertwined with that new life and place. Bittersweet, but hopefully more sweet in years to come. Sitting by your side the past several weeks, I know you could hear me talk to you. I thank you for always being in my corner, accepting my life choices, not always the best, and helping me, Alex, and Sarah in uncountable ways throughout the years. You were so proud of being able to play this important role in our lives. I don't know how I'll adjust to the absence of our daily conversations about nothing and about everything. I know I will keep reaching for the phone and then realize that I can't speak with you. I will miss your humor, your counsel, your strength, your passion, your wisdom, your optimism, and most of all, your unconditional love. Peace to you, my dear Daddy. You will be with us forever. Infinite love. Your baby, Lucille. Thank you for listening. Roz Hoffman, a dear lifelong friend, will now share a few words with us. And I just want to remind our speakers that the program's here, and if they could introduce the next person after them, that would be very helpful.
Nice. I guess I'm not going to be as eloquent and as dear Lucille, and I'm sure the rest of the family, but I will share a little bit about my life knowing Ben, and I think I'm probably the oldest person here who knew Ben. And I will call him Ben because when I was a teenager, that's what his name was, Ben. It became Isaac much later, but I still called him Ben. And so if you read the obituary or in right now the notices about Ben's early life, well, we did share an early life. Not that we knew each other at that point, but I grew up within a few blocks on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, as Ben did, and I too belonged to the Educational Alliance, which was a place where we found refuge. We had clubs and enjoyed activities. And Ben, of course, was the ultimate organizer. And during the Second World War, he organized activities, what he called a canteen, where servicemen would come for weekend dances, wherever if they were around. And unfortunately, since Ben is was about 4 years older, uh, he didn't associate with my girls' club. We were kids, uh, he, and so there was a older girls' club where they'd invite to parties and dances. And so I lost touch with, we left the Education Alliance and grew up, and I got married and had no idea of what happened to Ben. Well, several years later, I was married, and my husband had worked for uh, Montefiore Hospital, which was in New York City. He was a chemist, and he had. When I met him, he was no longer working there, but he established close friends there. And when when we got married, he said, "I want you to meet some friends." And there was Hilda and Ben. Small world, unbelievable. He didn't know who I was. He didn't recognize me, but I knew who he was. And the rest is history because we became so close as couples. We spent so much time with each other. We knew about our children, my two sons, and we just did a lot of things together, and we had lovely times. Went through difficult times, as Lucille said about his many accidents. I remember that first terrible automobile accident, which kind of was sort of the downhill kind of in terms of the different falls that he had. But we went to Levittown a lot, but the last years that when Ben and Hilda moved to uh, Amherst, we just loved coming here, and we visited them. At that time, I lived with my husband in a town called Highland Park, New Jersey, which is near Rutgers University, and it was just wonderful times. Hilda always had activities planned. We never sat around. We went to concerts. We went to movies. We went to the museums, local museums. We did a lot together, and food, of course, always. It was a lovely, lovely time. We really enjoyed coming here, and unfortunately, my husband died actually almost 6 years to the day of today, another week. And I moved to Philadelphia 4 years ago to be closer to my family, my two sons and daughters-in-law. And when I told Ben that I was moving to Philadelphia, he didn't say, "Oh, I'd like to come." He said, "I'm coming," because he had lived close to Philadelphia in Levittown, PA, and he loved the museums, he loved the places. And I think I was only there a month when Ben flew in from Hartford. He was using a walker at that time, and luckily, I have a beautiful area. I live right opposite the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and that's where he wanted to go. And we did, and also to the Rodin Museum. And unfortunately, Wilma and Scott are not here, but they came from New Hope, and uh, we had other friends coming nearby. Lorraine came. So it was a wonderful, wonderful time that we had together. And we, we called each other at least once a week. We were just that close. And of course, I always knew and loved all the children, the grandchildren, and we talked about our families and what what wonderful things were happening, and maybe sometimes not such wonderful things, but we did a lot together, and just just enjoyed the company uh, that we had, and the friendship, which I will never, never forget. And of course, my sons, Dan and Rob, who could not be here, but send their condolences and good wishes and love, as of course I do, to the family.
Hi, everybody. Does that work? All right. I'm Aaron, Isaac's son, firstborn. I'm the experimental model. Black sheep of the family. Before I begin my own remarks, I'm actually going to take a moment and read a short note from some dear, dear friends of ours. Roz, I think you remember the Hodaras as well as we do. With they say, dear friends, with the passing of Isaac and Hilda Ben Ezra is the passing of a pair of remarkable people who were good in the biblical sense of the word. When Morris Hodara's young wife died of cancer, leaving him with two small children, that first summer, Hilda and Ben opened their home to them and threw them in with their own brood. I'd be one of those three. So Morris could come up and see them on weekends. When Morris married Joe shortly after, she too was enveloped into the Ben Ezra expanding nuclear family. Hilda's mother and father were also nearby, and we even remember a camping trip in a modified trailer into the woods of a state park, a marvelous summer excursion. These are memories that will remain as long as we do. They are a beautiful part of our own story. Love, Morris, Joe, Miriam, Fred, Andrew, and Peter. I had the pleasure to speak briefly with Mo and Joe last night for a little while. Mo was watching the Yankee game. His son, Freddie, was at the Yankee game. And Mo is 94 and his wife, Joe, is 89. I know they'd be here if they could. So with that, I'll try to make my way through my own remarks here. And now, today is the 14th day of the month of Tishrei. It's Erev Sukkot, the day before the week-long festival of Sukkot. And Sukkot is known in English as the Feast of Tabernacles or the Feast of Ingathering. It's one of three Israeli pilgrimage festivals of ancient times, all of which are still celebrated, including once again today in Israel, thank God. The weekly Sabbath and all three Jewish pilgrimage festivals commemorate the exodus from bondage in Egypt. It's no accident that there are so many Jewish people involved in the labor movement. The Sabbath itself is a gift to Israel and through Israel to the world of the concept of a 7-day week inclusive of a day of rest, the Sabbath after the number 7, for all persons, and is the first of many such concepts found in Mosaic law that establish and protect rights for women and all working persons. Two examples would be the gathering of wood, which would have to be done the day before, the cooking of food that would have to be done the day before the Sabbath, and also the doing of any laundry. A woman does not work on the Sabbath. Although not religious in the traditional sense of the word religious, there are so many ways that Judaism was in the very core of my father's being. So much so that in many respects it may be said that Judaism informed his being and provided a moral imperative by which he himself informed and transformed the world, always striving to create a positive world, to transform the negative to the positive. One anecdote from my infancy illustrates this imperative, and my infancy can be regarded as a metaphor for everyone in the world. It happened that as an infant, my parents would place me in a baby carriage in the carport to enjoy fresh air and protected sunlight. On one occasion, my father observed the neighbor's cat eyeing me from atop the baby carriage. Outraged, he grabbed the cat and returned the cat to the neighbor, asking the neighbor to restrain the cat. Only to find that the cat returned not too long after. So for the second time, he picked up the cat, and this time he put the cat in his car, drove across the Delaware River, and left the cat to enjoy the streets of Trenton. He protected me, he protected all my family, and he protected the world. My father was gifted with great intelligence, strength, sensitivity, and perception. He had the talent as an artist to perfectly capture the essence of any subject in a 5-stroke sketch. His sculptures are expressive and in the mode of realism, not abstraction. He could read with comprehension at great speed and read voraciously both books and newspapers. His letters to editors were published often, and he became a well-known active participant in local politics. And he also had a green thumb, so our home was blessed with the trees he planted: maple, birch, apple, cherry. The name Isaac is derived from the word meaning to laugh. Anyone who has known my father knows of his capacity for joy and laughter, so much so that his joy and laughter would spread to everyone around him. The biblical patriarch Isaac, son of Abraham, was a digger and protector of deep and lasting water wells. And so it has been with my father, who, from the Lower East Side of New York, and as the son of impoverished, non-English speaking immigrants to America from Ottoman Turkish persecutions preceding World War I, overcame great poverty and the struggle to survive, to transform the world and water the world and green the world with his extraordinary love, intelligence, and great strength. We, his family and friends, may grieve today, and there is no permission required to grieve. We are free persons, not slaves, and we are free to grieve. We are also free to be joyous, to drink the waters of life that my father has provided, and to know that ours is the responsibility of legacy, that those waters of life not be poisoned or hidden for a privileged few at the expense of others. The Torah says that Israel will always be at war with Amalek, who harried Israel during ancient Israel's 40-year journey in the wilderness, persecuting the strays and stragglers in most unspeakable ways, as do Amalek's descendants today. And so we must continue in all our generations to fight for the human rights and freedoms that the Amaleks of the world would destroy. Inquisition, concentration camps, gulags, North Korean slave camps, Chinese occupations in Tibet and Xinjiang, all the horrors in Africa, Syrian barrel bombings, the violence in Latin America, on and on and on. These are all the Amalek of which the Torah implores us that it is our responsibility to blot out the memory of Amalek. Growing up as we did in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, we grew up in the American Revolutionary War spirit of Washington Crossing State Park. The Bowman's Hill Tower, dating back to the Revolutionary War era, gave us a panoramic view for a radius of at least 25 miles. We could look down the Delaware River and imagine George Washington crossing the icy Delaware River on Christmas Eve to surprise and defeat the drunken Hessian mercenaries that had been hired by the British. In the museum by the river, we could view a larger-than-life movie screen-sized projection of the famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware, and listen to a narration of that event. Not far away in Pennsylvania was a settlement founded by the great Quaker William Penn. Not far away in Philadelphia was the Franklin Institute, named for American founder Benjamin Franklin. It's a place that is at once a museum, planetarium, and active institute of science. A few blocks away is Independence Hall, where we'd go and run our fingers along the crack in the Liberty Bell. I can still smell the brass polish on that bell. Just a stone's throw from there is the synagogue Mikveh Yisrael, known as the Synagogue of the American Revolution. of which Chaim Solomon was a prominent member and vital supporter of George Washington and the American Revolution. The American Revolution was founded on the philosophy of natural rights that was a new philosophy gaining momentum in Europe and America and was a philosophical foundation of the later French Revolution. The American Revolution and the philosophy of natural rights informed the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. And these informed my father and our family with respect to our sensibilities of freedom, rights, and self-worth as human beings. This same sense of freedom, rights, and self-worth has its origin in the Torah of Israel and in the heart of every human being yearning to be free. The International Workers of the World said it this way: "It is better to die standing than to live on one's knees." To fight for life and freedom, to fight against totalitarianism and its lovers, anarchy and organized crime, this is our obligation from generation to generation. And just as my father devoted his life to our family and this fight, today we celebrate his fight and seek to honor him and his legacy as we remember him as his legacy this day. Baruch Dayana Emet. Blessed is the Judge of Truth. Amen.
I'd like to share just a couple of memories that I have of Isaac, and they've both happened in the last year. We worked together on the board of Amherst Media, and then later on other causes in Amherst. And we all know Isaac was dedicated to social justice during his entire life. He worked tirelessly on issues that he cared about. He was the embodiment of a community organizer. And he touched many of the lives of the people that are sitting here today in his efforts to improve our community, our state, and our country. He was a talented sculptor, a lover of music. The music was always playing when you went in to visit him. Beautiful music. He loved film, loved travel, and he especially loved being with his friends and his family and having a good animated discussion with lots of laughter. He deeply loved his wife Hilda and his children and grandchildren, as well as his large extended family. Love of his community here in Amherst and also in Levittown was something that he spent most of his time focused on. He loved his friends, who he stayed close to for many, many decades. And he reached out to friends. Even in the last of his life, he was always reaching out to his friends. I need a little company. You want to go to a movie? How about going out to dinner? Two short memories. Last November, after the election of our current president, whose name I will not say. She likes that. I stopped by one day, and I was terribly disheartened. Tears were flowing. And he listened, and when I asked him what we were going to do, how are we going to get through this, he said vigorously, organize. It takes people working together to change things. We have to keep working together. And of course that was totally Isaac, and it made me feel better. Then this past August I stopped by. Amy and Farns were on a camping trip. Lucille was here. And we went out and sat on the deck right there for the day and just talked. It was beautiful out, like today, except a little bit warmer. It was breezy. The trees were kind of swaying. Birds were chirping. And there were birds around that window that he loved, that he was looking at. And he said, "Oh, listen to the birds. They're happy today." I was not sad this time, but I was angry. I was getting even angrier about what was going on with politics. I began to rant a bit, and Isaac listened, nodded. He was further along in his journey at this time and was beginning to detach, not from people, but from current events and from politics. He was doing a great deal of reflection at this time about his life. So I began to talk, and he finally said, "Stop for a moment, Cynthia. Stop. Just take a minute. Look around. Look at how blue the sky is. Look at the leaves as they were swaying. Listen to those birds. They're so happy. It's a beautiful day. Enjoy it. This is what we have, this moment. Be thankful for life. I just stopped talking, and we sat and enjoyed that moment. He was ready to go, he said. He felt like he had lived a good life. He was proud and happy about his family. He treasured his friends, and I felt like he was really at peace. I'll never forget those moments with him. So now I would like to ask Farnsworth to come say something.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'm Amy's husband, Fransworth Lobenstine. Amy and I met when my son was 2, and pretty soon we were going down on weekends to Levittown to visit Isaac and Hilda. I have such a clear memory of being out of my comfort zone by evening time. I am a wasp. Card-carrying member. There was too much silent tension in my home growing up, and arguing was rare. The Hilda and Isaac show was pretty overwhelming, and I couldn't wait to put David to bed at 7 o'clock. I learned to be enveloped by their love, and we spent far more time with Hilda and Isaac than with my own parents. Thus, I became very much a part of Amy's family. And Hilda and Isaac showered their love on all 4 of us as our daughter Kate Lev was born and joined the Love Fest. Flash forward several decades. We were so excited when Hilda and Isaac, it is always said in that order, came to live in Amherst, and in their jubilant approach to life, they soon had more friends than we had gathered in a dozen years here. And they always partied on New Year's Eve long after we had gone to bed. Isaac's heart was broken by Hilda's death. She had left him a list of old friends that she wanted for his next partner in life. But he could never fathom that, and he visited her grave, where we will soon be going, nearly every day for 5 years to have a conversation with her. And he felt that she was indeed listening to him. I'm so glad that my psychotherapy practice is in our home. That made it easy for us to invite him when he needed more support than living alone on Strong Street to come live with us. And Amy designed our 2-story addition, and we were a family of 3 again. These years together have been precious in many ways, and I'm sure I'll be going into his bedroom to greet him in the morning and invite him to supper in the evening.
So, I'm Frank Gatti, and I have known Isaac maybe about 10 years. It's hard to say because my first knowing him was in town meeting, and he was just a familiar voice, often with wise things to say. He then asked me if I would join him on the board of Amherst Media, which I did without quite knowing what I was getting into. And that became an interesting time. But also gradually, I came to know Isaac more personally. And I would say something about political discussions with Isaac. Unlike so many of my friends that I get into discussions, Isaac was never real interested in discussions that didn't lead to action. There always had to be a purpose, not just to reminisce or to criticize or to be growly. And so it was always a positive experience, even when we were talking about things that weren't positive. He also was not just a political organizer, but somehow he had a way of bringing people together who didn't know each other. And so gradually I came to know a number of other people through times at his house or times when he would just ask someone to come and join a discussion. And so it was a enriching experience to be around Isaac. Things happened and grew when you were near him. I have a secret positive. I grew up in Jersey, and Greater New York still has a fondness to me. And being around Isaac reminded me of being around family, being around the metropolitan New York area. And I don't think I even ever told him that, but I always loved to hear the stories of his immigrant families and thinking of my own immigrant families. So, indeed, it's going to be sad to not have the pleasure of being with Isaac in person, but who knows what the mysteries of life are. Yeah. And John Spinetti is now asked to come and join us on the podium.
I'm John Spinetti. Isaac was my closest friend. He used to refer to us as brothers, and he would quickly add, separated at birth. He was raised in a Jewish family, he said, and I in an Italian. I'm a vendor at the market since 1972 at the Amherst Farmers Market. And when Isaac and Hilda moved to Amherst, they came to the market, and Isaac became a regular. Isaac became a regular at the market and sat at my tent, my farm stand, every Saturday, and would greet all the customers and his friends, and would discuss every aspect of political and whatever issues were present in Amherst. He later came to call that his temple, the spot at the market where he sat. And he said he was in temple every time he was there. Every year, as president of the farmers market, I request the select board for use of the farmers market, for use of the spaces as continuously for 30 weeks. And I'd like to share a story of something that's really typical of Isaac. One of my requests about 10 years ago, I was sitting at the board, and Isaac was watching on public access television. He was at home in his pajamas and saw that things were not going well for me, and that perhaps the permit might be denied for the farmers to use the market. So he quickly moved into action. He threw a coat over his pajamas, raced from Strong Street home, did a U-turn in front of Town Hall, to the amazement of an officer who said nothing, rushed into the meeting, was quickly recognized by the chairperson, and in typical deep, authoritative voice, with unmistakable Isaac, said to the board, "Give the farmers their permit and let them do what they do best, farming." Well, it worked. The board granted the permit, and Isaac returned to his temple. Thank you.
My name is Daisy Brody, and I'll tell you how I know Isaac in a minute, but I want to tell you that meeting Isaac's family has been one of my best experiences. Farns and Amy, Lucille, and I just met Aaron. And then there's tons of grandchildren, and it is a wealthy pack of wonderful people. How do I know Isaac? Eric and I, my husband, came to Amherst 6 years ago. We were looking for a house because our children were here. We looked all over. And by the time we were practically done with looking, I almost had given up. I was no longer getting out of the car to look at houses. I was grumpy, and our real estate agent was embarrassed, and I just had quit. Then he said, there's another house. And so we drove up on Strong Street into this S curve, and there was this white house. So far, so good. I did get out of the car. I walked up the few steps to that little deck and looked through the glass part of the door, through the door, and then through the living room, and then through the windows out onto the fields behind. Isaac had bought a scrappy little piece of half-acre land, smart enough to know, he went to town hall, found the thing, the little piece, that had not yet been bought up by the land trust, or agricultural land. So he built a house, he and Hilda, and one of my regrets living in that house is that I never met Hilda, because sometimes Isaac was there when I was cooking dinner, and I heard how Hilda moved around the kitchen. To my surprise, I moved around the kitchen very much the way Hilda did, which made me feel like hand in glove. It was a perfect fit. We didn't do anything to the house. There's one thing we did do. We lifted the windows in the bedroom up because Isaac loved to look out. And so the problem with that is that people could look in. And that's where I drew the line. The windows went up. Anyway, Isaac loved that house, and I loved it that he loved it, and I loved it that Barnes and Amy loved it, and we all loved it, and Eric and I often referred to it with Isaac present as our house, because it is still Isaac's house and ours. Just, it was such a perfect fit. So Isaac used to come over a lot, and he, and I'd go there, and we've all seemed to spend a lot of time sitting on that little deck with Isaac, talking about things. So he visited a lot, and one of the things that he wanted to know was, how are the trees? How are you doing with the trees? And then he would tell us how to prune them, because we probably didn't take care of them as well as he did. I have to tell you what Isaac planted on this land. I had to write it down. There's no way I can remember it. Trees and a couple of bushes. One red bark, one magnolia, one blue spruce, one holly, one dogwood, one redbud, one cherry, one Norway spruce, a Douglas fir, a blue spruce, a copper beech, a chestnut tree, a plum tree, honeysuckle, and a French lilac, and 2 crabapple trees. So you would think that the house would be buried in trees, but it is now shrouded by this lovely, lovely canopy, and often when I come home, I come up the rise of Strong Street heading west, and I see that the trees have grown, and he has built us a protection, and I feel always a mixture of feelings then, because I think how great for us, but I wish Hilda and Isaac could have spent their days there as they had planned, their last days. It makes me very sad. But then Isaac comes over and says, did you use all the closets yet? He had tons of closets, and I thought, we gotta fill these closets up. Closets, but he had everything. He had he built it for wheelchair access, big, wide corridors, and he had grab bars on there. He had everything. So we would sit, and the thing he liked the most was the 3-season porch. How's the 3-season porch doing? And you open it up, and we'd always go out on the 3-season porch. And we watched the birds from the crabapple trees, and he would know all about the hawk. And occasionally he would call up and say, how are the turkeys? And I'd say, the turkeys are great. They're 19. Oh, good, he said. And then he'd call me up a week later. Any more? Yes, 21. And then when they disappeared, we were both really sad. But they started coming back, and I said, Isaac, we have now 3 turkeys again. So he was very pleased about that. So at any rate, the house, I told Isaac, is perfect except for one thing. What's that, Daisy? Well, I think I'm going to save that story for just a minute because something just occurred to me about when Isaac wanted to visit. Often he would call up and he would say, "Hi guys," and then he would ask, can I come over? Can you come over? Hi guys, and then once, not more than once, he called up, "Hi guys," and then I'd pick up the phone and he'd say, "Daisy baby, time for you to get on my social calendar." And then I said, "That's great, Isaac. How about Thursday? Tuesday?" He said, "Well, I'm in your driveway right now." This happened several times. And one time it happened, and it was just after he had all these falls. Poor guy. Oh. And he got his power chair. He was so proud of the power chair. So this big van comes up, and the door opens. Isaac rolls out and he says, "Isn't this great?" And up he went. Remember this, Eric? Up he went up the hill, up the hill where the farmer's land was, and the angle is like this. And he said, "Watch this!" And up he went, and Eric and I went running after him. Maybe Isaac, just maybe you shouldn't do that. And he finally came down. But the guy was, he had no fear. So anyway, no mercy. The story that I was getting to was when I told him there's only one thing wrong with this house, Isaac. What's that? It's the street light at the top of the hill, which should be there because it's a dangerous rise before you come down Strong Street. He said, "Oh, shoot it out! Just shoot it out!" So he was so irreverent and funny about things that now the street light doesn't bother me because I think of Isaac saying that. In the same way, he would call up and say, "Daisy, baby, come on over, let's kick some ass." That's the other thing. Well, but the story I want to say for the last is when we were working on a project, Isaac and I. Working with Isaac, because Isaac sat there in his chair and he had all the ideas, and I did all the work. I didn't mind that, because I didn't mind that at all, because he was so much fun. So we were over at the, was it the Munson Library, the North Amherst Library? Yeah, and when we were there, Isaac was with his, he had both a walker and canes, and it was clear that he had trouble getting around. So, for those of you who've been in the library, I think they're trying to change this right now. Getting to the bathroom is a piece of work. It's like being in a medieval dungeon. You go down these stairs straight down, and it's dark, and it's a terrible, terrible situation. Kids go across the street to the Dairy Mart. I mean, it's just a... So anyway, that's... Isaac was talking to the librarian there, who was this lovely woman, and saying, what can we do about this for you? How can we make this better? How can we get some money for these bathrooms? She said, "It would be so good if you could help me," and she had tried and so forth. Anyway, he was talking about that. Around the corner came a guy who started attacking, with words, "Isaac, you handicapped people. What do you expect? You are taking the money from the budget, you are pushing us around, you're changing the laws, what rights," and so on and so on and so on. Well, the library went stone quiet. And it was this guy yelling. I was behind Isaac, and I thought, I'm going to punch that guy right in the nose in about a minute. Isaac was quiet, didn't move a muscle. And then the guy finished his spiel, and Isaac said something along the lines of, "It must be hard for you. I'm sorry this is your experience." I could barely hear him. So it was over, the guy left. And, I was thinking about Isaac's wonderful irreverence. He would break laws for social justice. But in this case, I realized the man is reverent. He was deeply, deeply reverent. He felt for this guy, and he felt for whatever pain that man had. And that's Isaac.
I need to say that I'm conscious of the time because the men who work in the cemetery are also setting up a block party or something downtown, and we actually have like a 1 o'clock deadline. So I'm tempted to skip some of what I was going to say, but I don't know. Say it anyway. If Isaac would not approve. These guys don't get overtime, you know? Okay, I'll talk fast. Anyway, so thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to our home. For the few of you that might not know me, I'm Amy, Isaac's middle child, also known as daughter number one. Where do I begin when there's so many millions of things I could say? I guess I'll say that I had the honor and the good fortune of having a dad nearby these 21 years. And in my daily life, for the last 6 or 7, I've actually lost track of when he actually moved in. I am the beneficiary of his adoring love, of his humor, of his creative ideas, of his embodiment of a reminder of our mother, of his friendships, of his supports, and of his great respect. Well, I didn't get his head of brown hair like you know who. I did get his, I got my mom's. I did get his ongoing concern for social justice. And I didn't get his extreme brilliance, but I got his bent toward social work and education. I didn't get his artistic talent, but I did get his penchant for house design and interest in designing affordable housing. I got his love of travel and camping and fishing, though I don't get to do it very often. I didn't get his unbelievable zest for life, but I have made a life that's worth living. I remember I used to say to people when he was about 70, I wonder if I'll be as energetic as my parents are at age 70, because I'm not that energetic now. I didn't get his vanity, or his ego, I hope. But I did get his sense of one's right to take up space in the world and to have opinions and to speak up and to be treated well and decently. I didn't suffer the economic deprivations he did or his family dynamics, but I did inherit the belief that not all of life has to be as unfair as it is, that humans can do better, and that certain aspects of life are current conditions rather than reality or the nature of things, and they can be changed. I did not inherit his eternal optimism, but I do have hope most of the time. While most of us were in a state of shock after this last presidential election, Isaac continued to believe this was just one more hill to climb. While we were depressed, he was busy encouraging us and making humor, like his The Emperor Has No Clothes Halloween costume, and his No Clothes coin dish, which I hope is over on that table somewhere. Trust Isaac to combine great art of the ages with current reality. We knew he was reaching the last months of his life when he, an avid news junkie, could no longer watch Amy Goodman in the morning. His poor health, fatigue, and resultant sense of vulnerability made the news too hard to bear. I feel great sadness that his last presidential experience was Trump. I'm sure many of you had a similar thought. That his lifelong struggles for the underprivileged, for civil rights, and against fascism could not prevent us from being in this political moment today. But I'd like to say something about family. Many people tell me that what a good daughter I am, which I hope I am, and how good it was of me to take my father into our home. I see it very differently. I grew up in a family of immigrants. Extended family living together was the norm. Elderly parents, cousins who were down on their luck, friends and acquaintances needing shelter from the storm. I also grew up in a multi-generational world where grandparents' friends were part of my life every week. Farns and I had already shared our home with one of Lev's teen friends for several years, and then with foster children for some years after that. So having Isaac here when the time came felt very normal to me. What was not normal was having a husband who came from a very different experience yet welcomed this arrangement without blinking an eye, who cared actively for his father-in-law, and who never once questioned this decision. It's he who really deserves the kudos. But I also believe that we reap what we sow. Loving parents deserve loving children. Cruel, neglectful, and critical parents don't deserve the care of the children that they consistently hurt. I was lucky to experience a kind, loving, and supportive father whose company I enjoyed and who added humor and energy to our household. The hard part has been watching that humor and energy gradually diminish and slip away. I was also fortunate to have parents who earned enough to plan for their old age and whose care has presented no financial hardship to us. Real kudos go to those who care for aged parents without adequate resources and supports. They are the real heroes. As I am writing this was at about 5 o'clock this morning, a beautiful pink sunrise was coming up over on the Pelham Hills outside the living room window. My dad would have been so disappointed to miss seeing that sunrise. So I want to end with a short poem that he wrote in 1994 after his near fatal car crash in New Jersey. I think expresses the quintessential Isaac. This is dated March 26, 1994, 56th day at Cooper Trauma Center, Camden, New Jersey. Each painful awakening greets another dawn. Good morning. The symphony within me sings another song of joy, drowning out the pain. Happiness reigns and makes the obstacles irrelevant for the moment. It cannot be denied. I have another day. Good morning. Good morning to all my loved ones and friends. Good morning to all my helpers and healers. Thank you for giving me another sunrise to share with you. Love and peace, Isaac Ben Ezra. And D, friend T. Shabazz.
Moment. Thank you to the family for allowing us to share this moment with you all and to share Isaac. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. This is a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. that if you read Isaac's obituary, you see that Isaac had met King and brought the iconic wreath from his home in Pennsylvania as a show of unity, love, and peace. I was fortunate to meet Isaac through Amherst Media, where Isaac was a long-term board member. What I found in Isaac was a person that had a radical sense of love and justice. And what I mean by that was that he was courageous and unafraid and called on others to do the same. I just want to say thank you to my husband wherever he's sitting. He gave me out of his lapel pocket his... Thank you, sweetheart. Knew I would need it. This call of justice and love was something that he shared with not only his family, his friends, but with the youth. Many folks in their 80s and 90s are content and happy to retire to their homes and small circle of friends. And who can blame them? They have seen a lot, done a lot, and perhaps have outlived most of their close family members and community. However, Isaac understood and participated in the community as an act of service, from town meeting to serving on the board of directors at Amherst Media. And he was not content to be at home enjoying his years as an elder in the community as a person that had already done so much and generously gave of his time. Even when he finally had to slow down a bit, confined to a wheelchair, he continued to serve. Isaac wanted to remain connected to the community he loved, Amherst. Through his show on our local access station, Conversations, and I'm a board member of Amherst Media, Isaac was able to stay informed and keep folks in the community connected through his series interviewing some lawmakers, politicians such as State Senator Stan Rosenberg, District Attorney Dave Sullivan, even my husband, chair of African American Studies. He was interested in making things happen and making sure folks stayed connected. He was not afraid to ask difficult questions that tugged at our emotions and probed questions of racial equality and class disparities. This was, of course, how he lived, and for me, he was someone that was unafraid to commit what I call radical acts of love for this town and for other human beings. His bio attests to that. I remember on a brisk and blustery day in June 2016, Amy and Isaac showed up with the rainbow pride flag at Race Amity Day in the town center. And it was a pretty cold June. Of course, it's the Northeast. The weather changes at the drop of a hat. And this was after the Orlando nightclub shooting. When the town wanted to change the method of funding for Amherst Media and create a request for proposals whereby the local station would have to compete for taping government and educational programming, Isaac helped to organize the community, preventing them from doing so, attending nighttime select board meetings in his wheelchair. And it was pretty cold. In October, I forget which month, but it was pretty cold. And he was out there with us. Isaac was adamant about making sure Amherst Media remained a place for the people. Even 10 years ago, when the town wanted to subsume Amherst Media under the auspices of their town government, Isaac, again, he led that charge 10 years ago, demanding that Amherst Media remain only accountable to the people in this community. Just this past summer, Isaac spoke to the encampment group out at Hampshire College, bringing his activist life full circle back to the beginning of where he started organizing for peace. He always asked about Amherst Media and wanted so much for us to have a presence at the farm stand, so thank you for mentioning that. He organized, when the request for proposal was happening, that we sit, and he sat. You know, again, bless you all for bringing him out there on Saturday mornings. He sat there wanting to make sure people connected with us as a local station. I'll just end with the last time I saw Isaac. We were planning an event for Amherst Media, our shindig, at my home. And I was driving this way, and Isaac was rolling in his wheelchair down the street. It was a bright, sunny day, a beautiful day, and I stopped, and thank goodness, you know, this traffic can get pretty hectic, but there was no one behind me, and I just stopped, rolled down the window. I said, Isaac, I'm going to see you at the shindig. And he says, oh, it's next week. And I said, no, it's this week. And he says, oh, I have a dinner, but I'm there with you in spirit. And it was just a beautiful day. He was smiling, and that's how I want to remember him. Telling me stories of his activist life and smiling in the sunshine. Isaac was really a friend and whom I consider a mentor. I found courage, compassion, and creativity in Isaac as if he was born of my generation or younger. Isaac was someone that continued contributing to this community as a staunch social justice advocate till the very end, and loving us all passionately and radically.
Hi, I'm Jerry Ben Ezra, Isaac's nephew. He was certainly a much better uncle than I was a nephew. I'm going to cut short a lot of what I wanted to say. because I could see him saying, these people work for a union. Don't keep them waiting. So I'm going to do what a judge told me a long time ago when I first started practicing, many years ago, which was you hit the meat and you hit the seat. So I'm going to do that real quick. I traveled a lot in Asia, and one of the things I learned was what they called windows to a soul. And it wasn't the big things that everybody's been talking about, but a lot of it was the little things, which I won't go through because it's a litany. But I have to talk about my uncle, the criminal who got arrested at the Big Y because he was, well, you folks know that story. And I won't bother for those who don't. But I think that I always saw Isaac, and somebody mentioned, I think you did, Aaron. And by the way, you weren't the black sheep. We never talked when we didn't discuss how his kids were doing and how you were doing. You had a very special place in his heart, and I don't want you to walk away from here without knowing that. As Jews, we try to live to be a righteous person. And Elie Wiesel said once that we don't teach people to be Jewish, we teach them to be human. So that was my uncle. He certainly did it with me, and I won't be able, because we don't have time to go into how that came about. But I think that I think that Isaac, one of the stories he shared with me recently was the happiest time in his life, and these are things probably people don't know because he wouldn't say it. Maybe you do. That the happiest time growing up was when he was in a sanatorium in upstate New York, and that was because he was away from home and all the dysfunction there. And yet, those are the things that drove him, because he never forgot. In many ways, cutting to the chase, he never took his good fortune for granted, whether it was meeting your mom or whether or not it was the children and the grandchildren. But I think that in many ways, Isaac is probably the richest man I know, and all of us are richer for having known him. And just to close, to get to the seat, because that judge is gone, I could probably get a head slap from him too. I believe that souls live on in the good that they do and that they leave behind. And I know I always came away from my many telephone conversations, most of which I must admit he was the one who started. I think that the answer is that at the end of the day, he was a righteous man who never forgot where he came from, who never forgot, although he didn't pass it on or talk about it, the baggage he carried, but yet tried to do his best to help others carry theirs.
Grandchildren?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, my name's David. I am Isaac's first grandchild. When I was married in 2004, the bleak younger Bush years, to this wonderful woman here, Isaac gave a beautiful toast at our wedding and said lots of really nice things. And then he paused, and that devilish grin came across his face that many of us know so well, and he said, "Regime change!" and then sat down. It was not always easy to be Isaac's grandchild. There were many times sitting over bagels or making hoagies with him. He didn't cook, but he made a mean hoagie. Where there were lots of other things that I would rather have been talking about than, take your pick, you know? The perils of income inequality, or the benefits of socialism. But what I now realize as a father is that it is our prerogative to lecture our children and our grandchildren, I hope, one day. But more importantly, what he showed me and what Hilda showed me and what his children have shown me is that our community is everything about us, and that we can do no effective work. There can be no effective radicalism without deep and soul-nurturing roots. So I would like us all to leave here and to continue to be those roots for Isaac.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm the youngest of the pack. I had a poem that I was going to read, and then I decided I hated it. So I'm just going to say a couple brief words, and then hopefully not have the union yell at us. I was with my brother this past weekend. And obviously, you know, it's difficult when... Excuse me, I'm sorry. Thank you. It's difficult to think about an impending death of one of your loved ones. When I was a little girl, I used to hold my breath when I passed the cemeteries because I was told that, you know, the spirits would get inside you and they would, you know, I guess, mess up your innards and your brain. Well, I decided after my grandmother died that I was not going to hold my breath when I passed the cemetery anymore because I hoped that she would get inside me and mess up my brain a little bit. I always kind of liked the idea of being possessed, and I honestly, I hope and it would be an honor to be possessed by my grandfather. And we passed this one memorial this weekend in Philadelphia, right in Washington Square, and it was very beautiful with the torch in front of it and the statue, and the words read, "Freedom is the light for which many men die in darkness." And for my grandfather, his light will never die. It will live in the trees he planted and in the smiles of the people that he loved. And I want to leave that with you, is that to pass your light on to as many people as you can reach, because that was his goal. And I want all of you to further that for him. Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex. I'm Sarah's older brother. Gramps was a good man. And I don't mean that in like a superfluous sense or a broad manner. It was who he was, down to his very core. Often we see those who simply acknowledge what's going on in the world, complain, make noise, raise awareness. But they never really go out and do something. They never stand, fight, or bleed for it. Gramps is different. Yeah, he protested, engaged media, created a community. That's not what made him different. Gramps was a man who truly loved humanity. He was a man who saw change beneath the rough exterior. Like a sculptor, both in real life and in his work, he could ascertain the method to chisel away through the rough edges and really make a difference. Whether it was change policy, change perceptions, or changing people. Truly good men are not remembered for their beliefs, but for their actions. And Grandpa's actions will be remembered. Thank you. Up next is my cousin Lev.
Well, it was a terrible idea to go last. So yes, I'm Lev, one of Isaac's lucky granddaughters, and daughter of Amy and Farns. And I could certainly speak, as many of us have, about all that he taught us in his pursuit of justice. And as my brother mentioned, his truly uncanny ability to turn any birthday toast into a soapbox for Medicare for all. But I wanted to share with you just this side of this totally fun, sweet, hilarious, adventurous, ever-loving Zeta. Some of my best childhood memories take place in Levittown, either on weekend visits with my parents from New York City, or when David and I would go for a week or two of the summer for pure Bubby and Zeta time. He was so vibrant and active and fun. We used to go swimming at the Y and apple picking at Snipes and play endless imaginative games in the yard. He taught me about clay and sculpture, how to cut off a chunk with the wire tool and pull the metal step stool so I could put all 40 pounds of force into kneading out the bubbles. He taught me how the body was made up of different shapes stacked on top of each other and to carefully score and blend each of the edges so they would stick. I remember distinctly one night in Levittown yelling from him from the bedroom at night. I'm not sure where Bubby was because she usually would have been the one I had called. And city kid me was absolutely terrified of the crickets. Rather than just comfort me, as I think she probably would have done, he scooped me up in my PJs and took me out into the yard. He held me tight and showed me what the country looked like at night. That Levittown was the country is kind of hilarious. Pointing out the stars and the silhouettes of the trees and listening to all the sounds that filled the air. He was famous in our family for his bedtime stories, The Adventures of Wetzel and Pretzel, which he always fell asleep during. I, however, usually vetoed these in favor of his hospital stories. Tell me a really gory one, Zeta, one with all the blood and the guts. And he would proceed to tell the story of one of his 9 lives. Thinking back, it's remarkable that he was able to joke and laugh and seeing the humor in the you can't make this stuff up story in something so scary or traumatic. But embedded into each of these stories was a tale of his resilience. As I got older, he shared more and more of his incredible history of activism. In high school, I wrote a story for my school newspaper about how different the school experience was for kids who were gay. I showed him a draft and he was so proud. And then he asked me if I had thought if any other groups of kids felt the same way. He told me that the GSA would get more done if we built coalitions, worked alongside the students of color or the students with disabilities about creating a school that was more accepting of all diversity and not just my own. So I take with me his incredible ability to find joy and make his own fun, his tenacity and fierceness when pursuing what's right, and his deep loyalty to family where he built his foundation. I take his commitment to building coalitions to seeing the deep connections between one person's struggle and another. He knew in his bones that justice for him meant justice for all. So Zeta, it looks like you finally made it to the end of this Wetzel Pretzel story before falling asleep and sharing your train whistle snores. Good night. I love you.
This signals the closing. I was going to read something that one of Isaac's dear friends, well, her and her husband, Wilman Scott, wrote, but I think we've pretty well covered his activism and how he's inspired us, and we are short on time. So I just wanted to, first of all, thank you so much for sharing so much with us in our lives. Listening to everyone today was just so special for us, and so we thank you, and we thank everyone who came. Those of you who we invite you to join us at the South Amherst Cemetery for burial Kaddish and the blessing of the mourners immediately following this service. And it's within walking distance, but we do have shuttle cars available in the driveway for anyone who would like a ride. Following the burial, please join us for refreshments and community as we share memories of Isaac back here at the house. I'm just going to make one request of a few able-bodied folks in the audience, if you could give a hand with taking some of these chairs away, because we need to make a more pleasant environment for us when we come back. And at this time, could the pallbearers come forward? I would appreciate it if everyone would stay seated until they leave. Lori, are you doing the cueing the music? Somebody's cue. Oh, Joanne, thank you. My bestie is cueing the music. So thanks again.
He must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling, he keeps on rolling.